Hey guys, it's Brian from Quantum Motorworks. In this exclusive members-only video, we're going to cover the procedures and steps, as well as the tooling required to diagnose this 2016 KTM SX85. Want to stay up to date? Then subscribe to my channel for more motorcycle-related tutorials. Don't forget to hit that like button and get ready. So my customer brought me this 2016 KTM SX85, and basically the complaint was it's hard to start and kind of bogs out while it's riding. So went ahead and he started it up for me, and it really didn't sound that good. So I noticed too, fuel valve was on, choke, it only really runs with the choke up. This is the choke lever right here, and it's kind of having a hard time staying in the on position right now. Kind of use that vent line to hold it up. Okay, so let's just say we just bought this bike and we want to do our, basically our preliminary checks. Go ahead and see what condition it's in. These are the basic chassis checks that you're going to want to do on your bike. So first we'll just go ahead and start with the handlebars. Make sure the handlebars are nice and tight. From looking at the clamps, I can see the clamps are not evenly spaced, so that's, just kind of shows maybe they weren't put down. They even look like they could be a smidge off to the right. The next thing you're going to want to check is your grips. Often these are underlooked, but obviously a good set of grips is what keeps your hands firmly planted. Now if the ends are a little messed up, that can be good and that can be bad on the throttle side. You want to pay close attention and make sure that your throttle tube, in most cases, most of these KTMs, the throttle tubes are made of plastic, so if it's had a hard hit on the right hand side, it's possible that throttle tube could be damaged and restrict the throttle operation. You're going to want to go ahead and take a look at that. While we're up here, next thing you want to check is your hand controls. You're going to want to check your clutch lever and your front brake lever. Now on the clutch lever, most of these KTMs will come with the hydraulic clutch. Some do come with the cable, but not many of them. Most KTMs come with the hydraulic clutch, so you just want to kind of pull that lever in. Make sure that it feels good and there is some resistance. If you don't feel any resistance and it feels spongy, you might have some other problems going on. And same thing with the right hand brake or the right hand master cylinder. You're going to want to check that as well. Now this one right here feels like it's a little tight, like maybe it's over adjusted where you just barely touch it and it's, or already putting pressure up against the master cylinder piston. So this is the controls, how this rider has it set up. Not saying that it's good, or maybe they're trying to compensate for a worn front brake master cylinder. It's very possible. Now the other thing you want to check is if there's any play in these steering stem bearings right here. Sometimes it's kind of hard to tell by just looking at the bike. What I usually like to do is kind of jerk it back and forth, and sometimes if there's minimal play, you won't really feel it. You'd have to almost put the bike up on a stand and then carefully, sometimes by even grabbing the front tire, kind of see if you can exert and feel any play. But if this front end hasn't been touched and it's been well maintained, there's a good chance it's not sticking or binding. They're probably fine. Okay, so the next thing that we can go ahead and check is we'll start with the front brakes. We'll obviously want to see if there's any obvious damage or abrasion marks. The front brake line also has the proper routing on the inside of the fork. I've seen sometimes people put on the outside, and it may look better that way, and to some people because it's not too close to the rim. But if it's mounted on the outside, it's going to get ripped off. So that's the correct routing. Doesn't look like there's any leaks. From the top there, we had pressure in the lever. So go ahead and take a look at the brake pads from here. Might be kind of hard to see. Sometimes with the mirror though, you can see that right there. Pads look like they're about 75% at least and even on both sides. I'd say that's good. Retaining pin is in place. All right, so we can go ahead and come take a look at the rear brake. So this is going to be the rear brake lever. Sometimes these get bent, and they get bent so bad that, you know, they could interfere with brake operation or rub against the engine cases. You want to make sure that the rear brake master cylinder is nice and tight with these two bolts here, and the pivoting arm bolt is tight. And then obviously the rear brake line doesn't have any abrasion or damage to it. This one looks good, and it's also routed away from the exhaust pipe so it doesn't melt. We don't see any leaks. Retaining pin is in place, and if we look there, looks like our pads are about same thing, about 50 to 75%, about the same on the rears. And rotors look good. That's another thing. There's no excessive scoring or grooving in the brake rotors. These ones right here look like they're really good or have low hours on them. We can take a look at the front brake rotor as well. Sometimes when you crash, it is a possibility to bend these front brake rotors, and that would be, sometimes you can tell just by looking at it, but sometimes it won't be obvious until you ride the bike, and you know, you'll notice a wobble from the front or even feedback in the front brake when you're applying it. So this one looks good, no excessive scoring or grooving. Okay, well, we're up here in the front. We're going to want to take a look at the front forks. Obviously these ones look like they're leaking pretty bad, so he's probably going to need a front fork rebuild, and it looks like the right fork's leaking pretty bad as well. And the bad thing about this, besides, you know, collecting dirt, as you can see all the dirt that's collecting, it's going to wear out these parts sooner, but the oil will eventually work its way onto the brake caliper, the brake pads, and the rotor, and you'll start to lose braking efficiency and even damage the seals that are on the master cylinder or on the brake caliper there. So we'll go ahead and just take a look at this rear shock. Not too much to look at. Now on these little KTMs and even some of the larger KTMs, they are linkageless, meaning that the rear shock does not have like linkage that you would see on a traditional Japanese bike. They're using a different mounting point to achieve the full length, full stroke of the shock, you know. And if you take a look here, you can see there's obviously no major grooving. Looks like the seal isn't leaking. You'd see moisture up there collecting. And the rubber bump stop or bumper here is in good condition and intact. And you'd also want to just make sure that the hardware for your shock here, the 13mm bolts, are nice and tight and snug. No leaking from the valves here, from the valving adjusters. It's a WP shock, nice shock. Preload adjuster, this is, I believe, made out of plastic. Just make sure that's not cracked. Sometimes if they're worked on by somebody who doesn't know what they're doing, they'll crack them. And obviously its retaining ring is tight in place. Another commonly overlooked item is the foot pegs. Want to make sure that they spring back into place and that the cotter pin on the bottom side is in good condition, intact. Some will have a washer. Most KTMs will have a washer there. And you just want to make sure that they, you know, spring back like they're supposed to. They're not bent around the welds right here. Sometimes I've seen them, they kind of get bent. If people modify them too by putting kickstands on them, sometimes this area of the frame will start to bend. Usually you're not going to see on a little KTM SX85, but on some of the bigger bikes you will. And check out this one. This one's good. Looks like the cotter pin and washer is intact on the pin. All right, good. And then next, just gonna want to go ahead and take a look of the fuel tank. Make sure that it's intact and not leaking. Obviously no cracks or obvious repairs. Looks like it's good. Gas cap is good. Has a nice seal on it, and we can even just take this off right here. Look at the rubber seal. It's good. If you shake it, you can hear the ball valve in there. Okay, and then after the fuel tank, we'll go ahead and check the plastics, make sure that these are, you know, not heavily damaged and secured to the chassis, not going to fall off. KTM, for the most part, uses a plastic or sometimes a composite subframe. So sometimes if these bikes are crashed really bad, there'll be damage to the subframe here. It's not like a traditional Japanese bike where they're made out of aluminum. These are composite. you know, basically like a 3D part. And if you crash these bikes really hard, or if they land on the back, sometimes they can break these subframes on these bikes. Let's see here. Looks like this one has a little bit of aluminum or steel. What is that? Yeah, steel reinforcement. But once again, not like a traditional Japanese bike. So plastics feel good, seats in good condition, no rips and tears in this one. All right, now we can go ahead and move on to the tires. We're back here. You just kind of want to grab the spokes. That one right there feels like it's a little loose, not fully tightened. Just kind of grab them. If you want to go to the next step, you could actually throw a spoke wrench on it and check to see if they're properly torqued. But usually just a good indicator, doing a quick check for a pre-ride, or after a post-ride, is grabbing the spokes. Like here's another loose one. You can see the nipple right there is moving pretty big. It's moving quite a bit. So definitely would want to do a spoke tightening, maybe even true the rim on this one. Tire pressure. Tire looks like it's pretty chewed up. Tube looks like it's good, just low on air. And if we go ahead and come around to the front side, same thing, check the spokes. Sometimes if you look at the rim band, you can see if there's obvious damage like bends or chips in the paint, scratches. Just kind of pull on them. But it feels like the front one is so far so good. Yeah, not too bad. And then check the front tire. Front tire looks okay. Maybe the tube's okay, just low on tire pressure as well. So that would pretty much complete the checks for the chassis. If you were to do like a pre-ride or just want to do a basic inspection on the bike without even taking anything apart, that's something that you'd want to do. All right, let's try to turn this thing on. Yikes. Let's try that again. Yeah, that sounds really bad. Okay. Yeah. Okay guys, now that we've already started the bike, had a chance to listen to it, doesn't really sound too healthy. Went over the chassis. Most of the chassis components are in okay condition, but there obviously is some wear, like the forks and the rear rim being loose. So now let's go ahead and check out some of those engine components. First things first, let's go ahead and start with the engine coolant. That's going to be located on the left hand side of the bike, and you'll see we have this cap up here. You'll go ahead and want to remove it. Sometimes it's easy, you can kind of get it with your hand. If not, you can remove this 6mm bolt and kind of carefully pull this plastic radiator shroud out of the way to give you a little bit more access. All right, caps off. This is a completely twist off, lefty loosey, righty tighty. And as we can see, looks kind of a little wet. So I don't see any coolant past the top of the louver there, and that's really what you want to see, is the engine coolant being past the top of the upper louver, which is basically the highest fin, which is probably located right where the seam is of the radiator, the top of this radiator right here. And so that's already kind of a bad sign. Hopefully this thing wasn't ran low on coolant. Let's go ahead and check the oil level. Now, from already taking a look on the right hand side of the bike here, we can see the power valve actuator cover is missing a bolt. So who knows, maybe somebody was messing around with it. Usually this hardware doesn't fall off. But to check the engine oil level, this bolt right here, it's right above the rear foot brake lever here. And you can see there's a little washer, a little copper washer on it. But if you pull this out, it already kind of looks like oil is going to come. So you might want to place a tray or an oil pan underneath so you don't make a mess. But basically we'll pull this bolt out. And it looks like something's coming out. That oil doesn't look all that good though. Looks like there's a lot of junk in it, maybe even coolant. So oil level, it should be coming out nice, solid, steady stream. Usually the oil level should be like maybe 200 millimeters above this oil check bolt here. So it's probably not empty, but who knows if that's actually oil in there or if that's something else. So we'll go ahead and just tighten up this bolt. And we're actually gonna, now we're gonna go ahead and drop the actual engine oil and take a look and see what condition that's in. So while staying on this side of the bike here, if you look right below the clutch cover in the right hand side of the engine, there's that 13 millimeter bolt right here. You can see it. That's going to be your engine oil or transmission crankcase oil drain plug. That's going to be a 13 millimeter. You can go ahead and take an open end wrench. Go ahead and crack that loose. Now let's see what our engine oil looks like here. Oh, look at that. Oh, looks like needle bearings falling out. Rocks? What is that? Oh, geez. That could be part of the crank, because I think the crank has like plastic. I forget, it's been a while, but I think like the counterweights or something with the bearing sleeve, something, there's plastic in there, but that doesn't look good. That oil doesn't look good, and there's obviously chunks of metal and plastic falling off. So yikes, that's not good. So while the engine oil is draining, there's a couple other things we can check. If we come back to the left hand side of the bike, we can go ahead and remove the air filter cover. It's on the left hand side of the bike. Usually if you just pull on the bottom and pull on the top right here, and you kind of slide it forward, boom. And basically there's two metal pins here that locate inside the air box, and that's what keeps this intact. So already looking at it, looks like the air filter retaining bracket wasn't even installed. So that's an issue. This thing probably was sucking in dirt. Let's take a look. Air filter, not too bad, but it looks like it definitely needs to be cleaned. Doesn't look like it was sucking anything into the intake. Not a whole bunch of sand or dirt in there. So we can go ahead and leave this on. Go ahead and put that air filter back in. Okay, so air filter, not bad condition, but definitely could be cleaned. Wasn't properly secured. Another engine related component we can look at would be the drive chain and sprockets. So if we look at the front sprocket, looks like it's pretty much worn. Chain's really dry. Tension appears to be okay, just a little on the loose side. Could be tightened up just a little bit. And if we look at the rear sprocket, it's pretty much done. These teeth right here are pretty much sharpened. So definitely going to want to recommend new chain and sprockets on the bike. Another thing to look at is the clutch slave cylinder. That's going to be located right here. It's sometimes very common for the seals on these to go out, and you'll actually get engine oil that'll bypass the slave cylinder on the inside and start contaminating. And even sometimes too, you'll see it leaking or oil protruding out on certain KTM models. And while we're right here, just go ahead and take a look at the fuel line. Is it going to need to be replaced, or is it going to be salvageable? This one right here appears to be in good condition. Not too bad. Fuel petcock looks like it's good. We got the off position and the on position when it's vertical. Horizontally like that would be the off position. And then we'll also go ahead and take a look at the coolant hoses. This white pipe here, don't see any rips or tears. Appear to be pliable still. No obvious leaking at the ends. And we'll come here to the right side of the bike and take a look. Kind of hard to tell. There is a weep hole somewhere over here on the water pump. I forget exactly where on these KTM models, but once they start to leak, you'll know it. They'll have a consistent drip and you won't have any coolant. And the other thing too, if I'm not mistaken, I think the water pump gears on these are made out of plastic. So who knows, maybe that's what we're actually seeing is the water pump gears teeth. Very possible. Might have to recommend a partial engine teardown, but from the way the crankshaft sounds, it sounds pretty bad. Okay, if we come to the right hand side of the bike, we can go ahead and take a look at the exhaust system, check its condition, make sure it's tight. Muffler hanger, the rubber dampener there appears to be in good condition. A little bit of dings to the pipe, it's not really a big deal. It's not too much leakage out of the header gasket there. And come over to the rubber connector here. Hose is intact, still feels pliable, don't see any obvious leakage. And then come to the silencer. Silencer in good condition, intact. Who knows, sometimes these, depending on what mixture you're running, if you're running it too rich, these are race bikes. On these KTMs, I believe they like 40 to 1, usually 50 to 1. And if you run them too rich, you'll actually clog the silencer and the bikes really won't run that well. You'll have to remove the fiberglass packing out of these silencers and repack it. And sometimes you have to do that in order to get, proper exhaust flow, restrict exhaust flow, and the bikes just won't run right. So that's another thing to consider. So now we're going to go ahead and take a look at the spark plug here. And if we come to the left hand side of the bike, you can see there's the spark plug here, pretty easily accessible. Now sometimes you can get off with your hand with a twisting pulling motion. If not, sometimes using a flathead screwdriver to assist will help get it done. Boom, just like that. You can just kind of move that off to the side there. Okay, and then remove the spark plug. It's going to be a 21mm open end wrench. You might be able to get a socket in there and a wrench, but socket in a ratchet, but it's probably a little easier to use a wrench here. We'll just go ahead and put the box end on, and oh, it looks like this was finger tight. Oh yeah, it's not even tight on there. So let's take a look at the spark plug. Looks like there's a lot of oil and carbon on it. It's not looking too good. Looks like we have a NGK BR9 ECMVX spark plug. Not sure if this is the right type 100%, but this looks like a odd NGK part number, so probably for this KTM here. The other tool you can use too is this 13/16 wrench to remove the spark plug. If say you don't have a 21mm, you only have standard wrenches, 13/16 will fit just fine. Okay, another cool thing too would be to take a fuel sample. And so to go ahead and do that, just go ahead and put the fuel valve to the off position and carefully remove the fuel tube. Okay, then we're going to go ahead and just take a clear cup here and let's go ahead and see what kind of fuel we might have in here. Whoa. Okay, so kind of hard to tell. It almost looks like straight gas. I don't see any, doesn't feel like there's very much oil in there. It looks like there's almost water inside of it. Looks pretty bad. I mean, it's very possible they mix some oil in it. I'm not sure what kind of oil. transmission oil, engine oil. I know KTM's oil is red. I actually might even have a bottle over here. Well, basically the stuff KTM wants you to use is by this brand right here, Motor X, and it'll usually say like T2. This is obviously transmission oil 10W50, but if you're not using the right oil or not using the right mix ratio, they'll definitely destroy an engine on these KTMs here. Okay, so this next inspection right here, we're gonna go ahead and see if we can take a look inside of the cylinder. Now there's a couple ways I might do this, but this is gonna be the quickest way with the spark plug already removed. It's a Harbor Freight inspection camera, and it works pretty decent, believe it or not. I've had this now for quite a while. Let's see if the battery's still good. There we go. So pretty good view. You can see there, looking at the bike. So let's see if we can stick this in the hole here. So it looks like there's a lot of crap on top of the piston. Looks like almost impingement. I almost kind of want to see the sides of the cylinder wall if I can. Might have to rotate the bike over a little bit. See where we're at, see if it went up or down. Looks like it might have, yeah, it looks like it went down. So we can kind of take a look there. I don't know if you guys can see. Not too bad on the cylinder walls. It looks like it's kind of hard to tell. I'm trying to see if I can see any cross hatching in here, or any grooving or scoring. Ooh, actually it looks like that cylinder wall is a little burnt up right there. I don't know if you guys can see that. That looks like the exhaust port and the exhaust bridge, if I'm not mistaken. Kind of going into the transfer ports there. It looks like the piston's at bottom dead center. And I see a little bit of, I don't know if that's just carbon buildup or like a hot spot. But I'm trying to see if I can find any scoring. Yeah, that looks kind of bad right there on that transfer port right there. It looks like the exhaust bridge. I see like a lot of removal. I don't know exactly what that is, but it doesn't look good. Yeah, I'm not too thrilled about the way that looks. There we go, there's another view. I can't even really see the crosshatch anymore. Usually you could see the crosshatch be pretty evident. I see like crap on the side of the cylinder walls there. I don't know if you guys can see. That's more towards the intake side, I want to say. But yeah, I don't like the way that looks. That looks kind of... Yeah, it might be like, and that might be what you kind of see in the oil right there. Some of that metallic material might be part of the piston or something starting to come apart in there. So that's not looking good. I'm not too thrilled or confident in that result right there. It looks like there's definitely some damage to the cylinder and possibly even the Hopefully the cases aren't damaged, but you won't be able to really find that out without tearing apart the motor. So the next thing we can kind of do is take a look by I don't know if I even want to do that. I was going to say in some cases you can go ahead and remove the carburetor and remove the reed box and look directly into the intake port. And with the piston at top, bottom dead center, you can kind of move it back up through the stroke and stop. And if you look through this port here, you'll be able to get a good idea if, you know, the piston's all scored up. Another thing you can do is actually remove the exhaust system here and see if you know, there's scoring or damage to the exhaust port or the backside of the piston. Usually be pretty obvious, but from using the borescope camera right here, that kind of, you know, takes out that possibility. I mean, not saying that I could if I wanted to, if I wanted a more thorough inspection, but just from looking at the, you know, view of the camera and seeing that damage to the side of the walls, I'm going to say there's probably damage in here, and probably damage to the sides of the piston skirt, which if I remove, you know, the exhaust and the carburetor and revalve, it'd probably be pretty evident. But the other thing we can do is go ahead and follow up with a compression test. Now, a compression test isn't the most accurate way to measure the compression on a two-stroke, but it will give you a pretty accurate or good idea of where the cylinder compression is at. And the reason why is because there are transfer ports, so when the piston's moving through its stroke, there's gonna be a loss of compression throughout its stroke when you're trying to do a compression test. So the correct way to actually do it is you would do a leak down test, and you would actually remove the carburetor, the reed valve box, and block the intake port. And then I believe you put the piston, I can't remember if it's at bottom dead center or top dead center, but you would basically pressurize the cylinder at that point with this blocked off, and then you could check to see if your stator side or clutch side crankshaft seals are leaking. That would be pretty evident. You'd be seeing air or oil being pushed out through those seals. And then the other thing would be is obviously you'll hear like an escaping of air bypassing the piston rings or through the cylinder if it's that worn out, and they'll be escaping through the crankcase. Like if you were to remove the engine fuel plug, you'll hear air escaping through there, or air escaping through the exhaust. Shouldn't escape through the intake. Well, actually I think you block the exhaust port too. That's the other thing you're supposed to do. You block the intake and exhaust port, and then you can pressurize this cylinder here and see what it does. But we're gonna go ahead and do a compression check, and we're gonna do that using our snap-on compression gauge set. And if we look at our spark plug here and go ahead and match it up, looks like it's gonna be one of these right here. Okay, let's go ahead and kind of do it. Let's see, can I stick that? Oh nice, I can stick that through there. It's kind of a crappy position. Yeah, actually I stuck the hose through the cylinder head hanger and kind of just twisting it on. Spark plug boot's kind of getting in the way. Okay, just fully seat that. Okay, now bike shouldn't obviously turn on, spark plugs removed. Okay guys, so I was feeling just a little skeptical about my hose, so I pulled it off, replaced the Schrader valve with the new one. These compression adapters use a special Schrader valve, so I just went ahead and replaced it with another one from my kit. And let's go ahead and double check this compression again. So once again, you want to go ahead and hold that throttle wide open, and we'll go ahead and there we go. Begin to kickstart this thing, and just look at our gauge, see if it changes this time. Oh, there we go. About 65 psi, so that's probably what it's run off of. We should have like at least 120. That would be a good indication that this engine's strong. So there's obviously a problem with that top end there. Did our test with the throttle in the wide open position. kick the bike until the needle basically stops, and that's pretty much it. So just from looking at these couple items right here, you know, the engine oil condition, the air filter, using the borescope camera to check the inside of the cylinder walls and the piston, doing a compression test, it's probably safe to say that this engine sustained some damage. Who knows, ran low on coolant, something part, you know, inside came apart, ridden hard, lack of maintenance. The next step is basically I'm going to recommend a full engine teardown to see what's bad. Basically give the customer an upfront price for a full engine rebuild at, you know, assuming like the cases are good and stuff like that. If the cases are bad, then, you know, sometimes it may not even be worth rebuilding these motors. But give them a price for a full engine rebuild, parts and labor, possibly machine work or new cylinder plating, because a new cylinder on these bikes is probably $300, $400, $500. You know, could easily have like $1,000+ in parts if it needs a crankshaft, piston, you know, seals, gaskets, you know, possibly a new cylinder head. See if they approve the work. But that's pretty much it. So these are the steps that I would take. You know, a lot of these procedures you can go ahead and do. Say you're checking out a bike that was used on the market. You can't necessarily, you know, a person's not going to let you perform all these tests. But as far as the inspections on some of the chassis related items and some of those engine related items, we would want to check out prior to making a purchase. But as this bike stands right here, it looks nice, looks cool, but it looks like it's going to need a full motor rebuild, probably carburetor work. It's going to be a lot of things that it possibly needs. So that's pretty much it. Thanks for watching. Go ahead and hit those comment boxes, like this video, subscribe, and follow along for the next one. Stay tuned.